Second Nature episode 50. Aaron Lutzi, can you believe that we made it?
Happy 5-0, Debo. We made it. How cool.
Halfway to 100.
I mean, 50 feels like a really, really big milestone, and it went fast. I don't know. Do you think it went fast?
Insanely fast. I mean, I've been white knuckling through life for a long time now, but I do think it is a good little milestone in our short journey. And yeah, I mean, it's been a really fun project to work on together. So I'm grateful for you, Aaron, in so many different ways. And I'm grateful for our listeners who find this interesting.
Dude, I am incredibly grateful that you pulled me into this whole thing, and it's just been such a fun thing to do together. And I hear so often like, oh, I just like listening to you guys riff. And this is the stuff that you and I always talk about on the phone, and how cool that what we talk about on the phone is actually interesting to people other than the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are grateful to our listeners. And in that vein, we crowdsourced some questions here today for our Ask Me Anything episode to celebrate number 50. Aaron, you've got the list up in front of you. Where do you want to start? You drive today's show.
I will drive. Well, actually, our audience is driving today more than anything. I just copied and pasted into a
Second
Google Doc.
naturalist, take the wheel here.
Okay, so these questions are all sourced from the Second Nature Slack channel, which if you're not already in there, it is highly recommended. We are over 300 people in there. And let me tell you, Debo, every single person that's in the Slack, just like absolutely incredible. Like when people do their introductions in the introductions channel in our Slack, my jaw is like on the floor, like, whoa, really? Every single one of them that comes through absolutely blows me away every single time. If you're not in there, you're absolutely blowing it right now.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. I was actually going to, I think, mention that later on in today's show too. But yeah, big thank you to everybody who submitted questions. And like you, Aaron, I've been blown away by the caliber of human being and career professional who has taken the effort to go sign up. So if you're listening and not in the Second Nature Slack, you're really missing out on the full experience. Anyway, launching into it. Question number one, Aaron Lutzi.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. First question comes from frequent contributor and on the pod, Steve Holmberg asked, what are the top 3 books you recommend most? What do you got, Debo?
Okay.
Top 3.
I'll get us started here. So it's hard to narrow it down for me. You and I are both book people, and we share our recommendations here on the podcast all the time. Obviously, we've talked about Barbarian Days a billion times, and you guys put pressure on Matt Sharkey to finally pull it off of his bookshelf again on the episode that went up this week with Sandy. Great episode, by the way. So that's a placeholder. That's something for both of us. But in the spirit of not being totally redundant, I've got a few here. Number one, The Compass and the Nail is a really good book. It's by an individual by the name of Craig Wilson. The subtitle is How the Patagonia Model of Loyalty Can Save Your Business and Might Just Save the Planet. I read this early in my business journey with Free Trail about the importance of sort of building your business around a mission, and ideally around a noble mission, as Patagonia has. This individual, the author, Craig Wilson, worked at Patagonia. It's been a few years since I read the book, but it did have a big impact on me. So I might be fuzzy on some of the details, but he was early at the business, worked in marketing, was effective in helping generate the brand loyalty and community that Patagonia has enjoyed. It's always centered around its noble mission. And, with Free Trail, obviously our tagline is trail running will save the world. We try and have a noble mission and live it every day. And The Compass of the Nail was influential for me there. Should I bang through all 3 real quick before I pass it to you?
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, I read last year, and I have come to be an enormous fan of Rick Rubin. I think, honestly, Aaron, BPC, Rick Rubin's podcast is my singular favorite podcast in the world right now. What he does, or how it feels to me, is he approaches everything as an art project. And I want to try and bring that vibe, feeling, and ethos into my business and Free Trail, and always be tinkering and working towards perfection understanding that doesn't exist, but that like thinking of something as a long-term art project is different than thinking of something as a short-term transactional business career, right? And I just think
Mhm.
reframing things that way helps to have a longer term orientation, because we both have come to learn that you really do need to have that long term orientation. I think artists fully embody that, and they go through highs and lows in their creative journeys. They deal with setbacks and blocks and burnout in the same way that athletes, entrepreneurs, founders, content creators do. The Creative Act, a fantastic book. And finally, I'm reading a book right now called Radical Acceptance. I wanted to include it here because it's had a big impact on me at the right time in my life. And I'm not even done with it, but because I'm reading it right now, I want to include it. And I think one thing we are very transparent about here on the podcast is just how difficult sometimes the journey can be. And I have come to find that a lot of my stress is born out of like a resistance to what I'm feeling or what I'm dealing with. And if I can cultivate a feeling of like accepting it, even if it's uncomfortable and not ideal, if I can just accept it and reduce that feeling of resistance, I can find a little bit more peace in my entrepreneurial journey, because I think I do create a lot more anxiety and stress for myself than is appropriate. And so this book has been a good reminder to just accept things, you know? And when you have uncomfortable moments, you're better off just sitting with it, accepting it, feeling those feelings, and in all likelihood, it'll feel a little less overwhelming when you reduce that resistance and cultivate a little bit more acceptance. Those are my three, Aaron.
You know what's interesting about the Rick Rubin and this book that you just recommended is I feel like one thing that defines Rick Rubin, because I love that podcast too, I feel like he's really calm all the time and that he doesn't get outside of that. He doesn't ever appear to be uncomfortable. And I feel like the more you slow down, the more you breathe through these moments, like you see him doing on the podcast, the better experience and the better result you end up getting through this stuff. So just smashing number 2 and number 3 together to find some essence, I think there's something really important there. And that may be the reason why he's able to be so creative, is that he is so calm,
Yeah,
right? I don't know.
100%.
Okay, here's what I got for books. Leading through that idea of calmness, the book that I recommend the most, and I used like, these are the ones that I would literally hand to every person I know. This is the litmus, because there's a billion books I could recommend at this stage. And I likely have. But my top 3, my semi Mount Rushmore of books that I recommend, number 1 on this list is The Daily Stoic. So I think I've given you a copy at one point, but it's a book that has 365 pages in it. Each page corresponds to a day, and it takes a lesson from Stoic philosophy and kind of adapts it to nowadays. This Ryan Holiday, book. And if you've read The Obstacle Way or any of his other books, this kind of distills it down into like a bite-sized daily thing. And I've been reading it with my wife every single day for the last 6 years. We read it right before we go to bed so that you're kind of thinking about it overnight. The Daily Stoic is absolutely worth owning. And I
You
would literally.
have you have given me that. It's sitting in some pile of books somewhere. I don't think I've ever opened it.
Oh my
But
God.
fun anecdote here, Aaron Lutzi. Just yesterday, I received a copy of "Stillness is the Key" by Ryan Holiday that I just ordered, and I'm excited to dig into that one. It was born out of this radical acceptance uh, rabbit hole that I've been going down. Stillness is also important to find the energy to continue on, isn't it? Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. This whole Stoic philosophy thing is really working for me in
yeah,
general. Just like maintaining my sanity, I guess. I don't even know how else to say it. It's been a huge element for me to be productive as I am, but also to like keep myself together and not get, pulled in 80 different directions emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It just somehow allows me to stay pretty centered. So,
yep,
Daily Stoic, it's easy because you only need to read 1 page a day. And at the end of the year, you're like, oh, sick. And it's a pretty easy call to be like, you know what? I'll just read it again next year. And it's just like a little nugget every single day. You don't have to read a chapter a day. Like it takes 30 seconds to get through one page and then you're done. So highly
Great
recommended.
recommendation.
Daily Stoic. And I hope that you pick it up, the copy I gave you.
I will.
Okay, number 2, this is my January 1st recommendation. This is a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Such a good book.
It's another one where every page in the book is like you could just read that one page and you could do it. It's not meant to be a daily reader, but each page has kind of a nugget of wisdom, and then you can go to the next page and the next page. It's broken up into 3 parts, and what it does, he talks about this concept of the resistance, and the resistance is anything that gets in the way of your forward progress, right? And the first chunk of the book really helps you define it, name it to tame it, and then it goes into, once you've now identified it, what do you do about it? And then the third part is kind of like, how do you move past it?
Yep.
And then, of course, third one, also a perennial favorite, The Infinite Game. I'm actually rereading this book right now just to make sure that it is as good as I remember it. And yes, it is absolutely as good as I remember. So Simon Sinek, Infinite Game, those are my top 3. Pretty happy with that list. There's about 50 more that I could recommend, but if I had to make a top 3, that's it.
Great list. And before we move on, a closing thought on question number 1 here for our audience. I was listening to a podcast recently where somebody made the point that it's a competitive advantage to have the self-discipline to sit and read. And I thought that was a really interesting thing, like a way to frame it, because in today's day and age, it's actually true. It does take self-discipline to open up a book rather than scroll on your phone. And in some ways, it's probably a competitive advantage to have that self-discipline, right? And like maybe just opening a book is a way to create self-discipline.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you can chip away at a mountain of books if you just read 10 to 15 minutes a day. And that's all I do. Like people are always asking me, like, how do you get through so many books? Like I literally carve out 10 minutes a day and that's it. It's just consistency over time. You can crank through quite a bit.
Next question, Aaron.
All right, next up. So we gave everyone else got 1 question. We gave Steve 2 because he's been on so many pods and helped us out. So Steve's second question is, what are your top learnings starting second nature? What do you think?
You start on this one.
Oh, great.
I mean, I can go if you want.
Yeah, you go first. Give me a second to think about it.
Well, I would actually probably go to where we just started the conversation, in that, like, I've had an instinct about doing this media project with you for years. Like, we had been talking about doing this for probably 2 years before we actually did it. And, I think, the biggest takeaway or biggest learning is that I wasn't a complete idiot, and having that ambition and insight. I would also just say, like, I have been surprised at the number of very interesting connections and conversations that I've had as a result of this podcast. Maybe I'll name a couple of things. Number 1, I had a conversation with somebody in our Slack group. I won't name him in case he doesn't want to. He's working on a trail apparel brand, and he had no idea who I was or what Free Trail was. Which was like so bizarre, right? It's like, because there obviously are a lot of people who have found second nature through Free Trail. Shout out to all those people. Love you dearly. But it's funny, somebody who's working on something trail running related who found second nature independent of Free Trail, which was pretty cool. And then on practical stuff, I would go back to the Rebecca Rush episode that you did. Loved that one. And the biggest takeaway for me was like bringing an athlete's mindset to business. In her case, she was talking about getting coaching and approaching your season with an athlete's mindset, or approaching your business with an athlete's mindset, where you have an opportunity to take an off season, to take a rest. And that's certainly something that I have not afforded myself enough of, with negative consequences. And so I would say that those are some of my biggest takeaways. And I would say Rebecca Rush's episode is a one in particular that stands out to me in terms of being dense with learnings.
The athlete operating system. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Okay. I think my top learning when it comes to second nature, and specifically getting this thing started, is something that I give out as advice to a lot of other people, because the point that you made about a lot of interesting conversations have come from starting this podcast and putting ourselves kind of out there in this capacity. I think that one of the most important things that anybody can do is demonstrate their expertise on a wider level and give them give people a greater surface area to experience that expertise. We talk all the time on the phone together, but then when we put it out on the internet, then more people could reap the benefits of that expertise, but also it gave us an opportunity to sort of demonstrate that. And I see a lot of people from our Slack channel who are building their own Substacks and using their Substacks to demonstrate their expertise. I actually really like Steve does a great job. Matt Trappy, I really like what he writes on there.
He's
Dre,
killing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dre has an amazing one. All people that are in the Slack channel and active, but also demonstrating their expertise on the internet. And I've got to imagine, just like it's been for us to demonstrate our expertise and the conversations that's opened up, it has to be also doing that on some level for them as well. And so I think a lot of people are looking for ways to get some traction or to open themselves up to new opportunities. And I think that it can be as easy as just demonstrate your expertise on the internet, even if your expertise is just curating and talking about the stuff that you've already done. It doesn't have to be, 3,000 word essays about this really crazy thing. It can just be curating information. It can just be sharing what you know. It can be sharing your experience in some way, shape, or form. And using a platform like Substack or something along those lines, I think is really interesting. And I feel like people are open to it and recommend stuff there where maybe LinkedIn isn't as much of that anymore. People are kind of looking out for themselves a little bit on LinkedIn, but on Substack, I think people are looking for new perspectives on things. And I think people demonstrating and sharing those perspectives there is really interesting. And I feel like that's a lot of what we've experienced so far too.
Love it. What a great lesson. Question number 3.
Question 3 comes from Matthew Haynes. Is there anyone in the outdoor sports world that's killing it on both the business and sports fronts? I think David Roche, am I saying this right? David Roche
Yes.
was mentioned on the pod once with his coaching business and his recent trail results. That's a rare combination, right? Killian, is Normal doing well? What do you think?
You get us started on this one.
Well,
You're the king of athlete marketing, and you have your finger on the pulse of what athletes are executing well, both as you know in their competitive careers and in their business careers. You get us started.
there's a lot of people that are on the way to this. One person, well, we did talk a little bit about Jamie O'Brien and what he's doing
Dude,
with,
I met him last week.
yeah.
So cool. I sat and chatted with him about business for a while. He's got some really cool new stuff up his sleeve that I don't think I'm at liberty to talk about, but big ideas, big ideas.
He's got a good team around him too.
And similarly, like being the master of his own destiny is what he's
Yes,
doing. Yeah.
absolutely. And now that he's got that momentum, he's got that trajectory, it's just, yeah, it's easy to keep it going, right? An object in motion stays in motion. And this is a fun one to watch.
Yeah.
So I would say, in the surf world, I think Jamie is a really great example of somebody who's really figured it out. I would also call out Eric and Paula from That Triathlon Life. I think
Yep.
what they're doing, they're in endurance sports. So like if we're speaking specific to outdoor, okay, maybe surf is in there, but I think what Eric and Paula are doing is really incredible in that they're storytelling, but they're really building a meaningful community. They're trying a lot of stuff. They've got an app, they've got a podcast, they've got their content that comes out weekly on YouTube, their newsletter. I mean, they are absolutely doing all the things right, and you can see it working quite well. I think Eric even made a few hires recently, which is super exciting. I think this is the precipice of where things get interesting when you're able to bring people in and start building up the actual business and brand. I'm
Have you talked to
excited.
him about that? I need to
Oh,
connect with him.
yeah, a little bit. And it seems like everything is going really well. So I'm just really excited for him. Like we've both been friends with him for a super long time and we're absolutely cheering him on.
Yeah.
But I think like if anybody wanted to look at how to do this specifically in sort of endurance sports, outdoor sports, that would be one of my top ones next to free trail, of course.
Yeah.
I'll put you in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, I do need to catch up with Eric. You know, more properly. He's been on the podcast a couple of times filling in for me when I'm absent, but I mean that's a big deal, that moment when you bring more people in. And obviously we're at a point where we're sort of thinking similarly, and so I'd love to compare notes with him and Paula eventually on that subject. But those are definitely great candidates there. And yeah, I was in Hawaii last week for Red Bull Athlete Summit, so I had a chance to hang out with Jamie O'Brien, Ian Walsh, Darren Rolfs, Kai Lenny, and just like being able to chat with those individuals about business and career stuff. Very, very interesting. And especially because like I wasn't the oldest guy there. Darren Rolfs is 50, Jamie and Ian Walsh are both 41, I think, and no signs of slowing down, and certainly incredible careers across all of them. I just want to name a couple more on top of that. Jeremy Jones in snowboarding, OG's OG. He's probably close to 50 at this point. I think he's done a good job of being very multi-dimensional, not only being a great snowboarding athlete and a pioneer in the sport, but also founding Protect Our Winters. So shout out to that organization, and also has his own apparel brand and business. So not only being an athlete, but he's got the nonprofit, he's got the for profit, and he is obviously very authentic in terms of his influence on the sport and his ability to actually charge with the best of them over decades. And then also Travis Rice, who's sort of like the modern day Jeremy Jones too, like has ownership in a bunch of different interesting businesses, and who is also a pioneer, I think, in the new age of snowboard films and content, and branching out from pure competition and stuff like that. So ironically, the two that I wrote down were both snowboarders.
That's all good. Travis is a great example, and the natural selection tour has been
Yep.
a huge thing that he's been working on. I mean, all the films that he's been a part of. I mean, he's really broken ground on a lot of sort of the athlete, flywheel, really, of like making content, not relying on contest results, but really like putting out great stuff and then building his own sort of empire around that. There's a bunch of stuff that he's sort of invested into that it doesn't really get talked about a lot either, but he's done a lot of things for snowboarding and beyond, and pretty interesting
Aren't we
to see.
having somebody on from natural selection here pretty soon?
Work in progress, but yeah,
All
I think
right.
we're going to get to talk to the person in charge. So pretty
Awesome.
exciting.
That'll be
Okay.
a great episode.
Next question. In looking back from where you started and where you are today and building what you have so far, what is one thing you're glad you did not do, and one thing you're glad that you did do? This question's from Mason Boswell.
Mason's my boy, so I'll go first.
All
So
right.
things that we did do: buying the Gorge Waterfalls race. Best
Huge.
investment of my life. And it wasn't totally obvious. In fact, my business partner, Ryan Thrower, happened to have a conversation with Jeremy Long, the owner of Daybreak Racing, who is a fantastic race director, event producer in the Pacific Northwest. And they had sort of had this galaxy brain of what if Free Trail and Daybreak collaborate on an event. And Ryan came to talk to me about it. I was like, I don't think so, bro. Like, we're not getting into races or whatever. I eventually chat with Jeremy about it, and we figure out that we have the opportunity to acquire Gorge Waterfalls, an event from another outfit called Rain Shadow Racing, and their owner, James Varner. He was there was a time when the race existed and was a really prominent event, and then there was a devastating fire in the Columbia River Gorge, and so the race didn't happen for 4 years. And at the same time, James was like interested in consolidating his event portfolio, so it just opened up this win-win opportunity where we could come in and buy the race from him, carry on its legacy, be the stewards into the next generation, and also have a really interesting business opportunity. It was expensive. Like I've never bought anything that expensive. But, we were able to, finally get it all paid off and stuff. And, it will hopefully be a really important part of our business, in addition to being something that's really sentimentally fulfilling for years and decades to come. So that's the thing that I'm really glad that I did do, that I was reluctant to at first. So shout out to Ryan Thrower for the idea on it. And something that we did not do, I will say happened very recently. And before I get to that, I think it's important that I state that I'm very good I'm very bad at not doing things. I have a propensity to say yes to everything and getting to a point where then I'm totally overwhelmed and burnt out and not doing well on anything that I'm doing. I've been really enamored, as you know, with a lot of these print magazine publications recently, and we have a subscription product through Free Trail that I really wanted to add a trail running magazine, probably just a once yearly and annual print publication to our content portfolio. And I made the executive decision recently that we were going to not do that, at least for the time being. And I have to say, I took a big, deep sigh of relief and patted myself on the back for having the discipline to not chase that shiny object, because I do chase a lot of shiny objects. But the possibility is still on the table. Shout out to Christian Dunn, who's a Second Nature listener, who's helping us vet out this potential opportunity. Great dude. If you're in the market for any design work, especially print design, give Christian a shout out. But that's one thing that we did not do that I'm glad about, at least in the short term. And who knows what'll happen in the long term.
What's the line that they always say? Like, you can do everything, just not all at once, right?
Yeah.
There will be time.
You
And
can do anything, but you can't do everything.
fair. Definitely pretty fair.
Yeah.
What do I have here? What's one thing I'm glad I did? Okay, here's sort of a deep cut. So when I was an athlete manager at Red Bull, I got this idea out of the blue that I should try to do every single one of my athletes' sports, which I don't know if yes, it was a good idea, I think. At times I questioned myself, but that is really, I think, the crux of the beginning of our friendship was when you started kind of coaching me in ultra. And that I think is part of the reason why it took me so long to sign you, because I was afraid. I was afraid that I was going to have to run really far, but it worked out okay. And I feel like it built our friendship into something really meaningful, and how you came and supported me at races, how you supported me through the training was really cool. But where that ended up leading beyond our friendship and beyond our relationship in general, I did that with a lot of other athletes as well. I didn't run 50 miles for them, but I picked up some stuff. And one of the things that I picked up, I signed a gamer by the name of Grand Pooh Bear, who I know you met.
Hung out with him in Hawaii too.
Yeah.
Did he send you that selfie we took?
Oh yeah. Yeah. uh, And one of the things that was important and sort of an inflection point there was that instead of, like I was on this path of like, oh, I'll be good at or I'll try everything that my athletes do. Instead of being like, oh, I'm going to go play Super Mario Brothers a bunch and get good at it, I decided to look a little bit deeper into what he was actually doing. And the thing that he's professional at outside of playing video games is creating community through content. And so when it was time for me to decide, like, what was my project going to be, just like my project with you was going to be like, oh, I'm going to run a 50K. My project that I was going to assign to myself with him was I'm going to learn more about how he builds content and community together. And I think that's something that is worth putting my effort into and my energy into. And that is what led me into creating my YouTube channel, which obviously has had a huge impact on my life, but also understanding content and community and the levers that allow that to happen, I think have been really useful and helpful to everybody in my circle, hopefully presently company included.
Hell yeah.
And so I think one of the things I did right was sort of like starting the process of doing all my athlete sports, but more importantly, using that as a way to learn something that I did not expect to learn, which ended up being this thing. And I think giving yourself little projects where you're going to pick something up, challenge yourself, learn something, you just never know where that's going to end. When I started that, I was a skier thinking that I might learn how to snowboard. By the time it was over, I had run hilariously far on multiple trails. I had learned how to create a YouTube channel that was, growing rapidly. All the other things that came out of it, I could have never expected at the beginning. So I think that was really, really important. One thing that I'm glad I did not do, I This is going to sound funny, but I'm glad that I didn't stay at Red Bull. I was there for 12 years, which was an incredible education for me. I learned so much while I was there. But had I stayed there, we wouldn't be doing this podcast right now. Had I stayed there, I wouldn't have learned anything about performance marketing. I wouldn't have learned anything that I picked up in the last 3 or 4 years. I would have continued to throw you high fives, make sure that you were properly branded, scouted and signed a handful of new athletes, and, kind of just like done what I was doing. And I think it was important to leave my dream job. That job was exactly what I wanted to do, but it was important for me to stretch beyond that because there was nothing more that I was going to get out of being there other than just more of the same. And so I'm I love everything about the 12 years that I spent there. I feel like it gave me so much, but I'm glad that I didn't stay for like the rest of my career. I'm glad that I moved on.
The
And it was
spirit of Lutzi still lives there.
it was hard to leave, man. It was an emotional thing. I mean, 12 years anywhere is like a big deal. And especially like, how close, you know, we all
And
were.
Red Bull's one of those places where people stay for decades.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with that. Anybody that's still there, all the respect in the world because they
Oh
are able to
yeah.
do incredible things. But like for me, it was time for me to move and expand and grow. And what I've learned in the last 2 or 3 years since leaving there has been, another decade's worth of information that I probably never would have gotten it had I stayed.
What a great addition to this episode. Just for our listeners too. When you called me to tell me you were leaving Red Bull, I was in Europe at the time, and I sort of had a feeling that it was coming just based on the text exchange we had leading up to it of like, hey, we need to talk. Can I call you? And anyway, you spread your wings and you flew. And now, yeah, a lot of fun ways to continue our friendship and our collaboration. But I just also wanted to add for our audience, you had one of the most coveted jobs in the entire industry, an athlete marketer at Red Bull. And when you left, 1,200 people applied to fill your role. So, I mean, literally one of the most coveted jobs in sports you walked away from. And that takes a lot of courage. And yeah, anyway, you've been proven right. But shout out to Red Bull and everybody over there. And they continue to be pioneers even without you on the roster. But good stuff.
All right. Question number 5. How do you define success in your life and for the businesses that you're building? What would you do exactly the same, but just earlier in your career? This question comes from Christian Rawls.
Do you have any easy thoughts on this one?
I don't know if there's any
I mean,
easy.
I
Well,
could go like the second half of the question is
okay.
easy for me, just
Yep.
like starting my podcast earlier when I was more, serious about training and racing because I was an early adopter of the format and I wanted to do it for such a long time. I dragged my feet on it, as you know, Aaron, forever.
Huh.
And ultimately we got it going and it's been a success by any measurement, but I wonder how it would look if I would have started a little bit earlier.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you were an early adopter. It's funny to think how long you've actually been doing it too,
Yeah,
from the earliest days. I
almost
mean,
5 years.
it's a long time. That's a lot
Yeah.
of episodes. You're definitely past 50.
But
And
it'd be like it'd be 10 years old at this point if I would have started when we first talked about it.
yeah, true, true, true. Yeah, that's a great point. What would you do exactly the same but earlier? Yeah, starting when yeah, it's funny too. Like I had actually started creating content before I started working at Red Bull, and when I got that job, I hung up my camera. I sold everything, and and YouTube didn't exist when I was originally making content. We would make content that would go into the websites of whatever brand we were working with. And I just think about like, oh, if I just hung on for like another year and then started posting content to YouTube in 2009 and just kept posting until now, we who knows, or maybe I'd be totally burnt out on making content and it just whatever. But yeah, I wonder if that's it, like making content, starting earlier. It's always that's the case, right? Like the best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is today.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe that's the takeaway then is if you have a feeling that you want to do something, just frickin' do it. I mean, it
Mhm.
goes back to what we were just saying about Red Bull too. Like eventually you do have to step off the safety net and build the parachute as you're falling, so to speak. And yeah, I think, there's examples in both of our careers where we probably wish we were a little bit earlier, a little bit quicker, dragged our feet a little bit less, and that in hindsight that's the bigger regret, not taking the risk but
Mhm.
waiting so long to take the risk. So to our listeners, go jump off that safety net.
You know what the thing is too? I've had so many people recently asking me like, "Oh, what are you trying to do with second nature?" And I was like, "Okay, well, here are the ways that I think we could bring value in a meaningful way in a handful of different ways." But at the same time, I'm not trying to be overly prescriptive about it either because I want the universe to guide us into some of this stuff.
Yep.
I don't know exactly how it's going to go, and that's okay too. And I think that the number one thing that holds a lot of people back is that they're like, well, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. And it's like, yeah, well, guess what? None of us do.
Yep.
Even Super Rider, that started out as such a niche channel for trials riding, and now it's a mountain bike channel with a giant audience. And if I had started, well, if I would have done that right from the jump, I'd be in pretty great shape. But ultimately, like you have to adapt along the way, and you have to understand that things are going to change. Where we started with Second Nature, it was just you and me talking once a week. Now we interview people and we post this podcast twice a week, and we have a newsletter, and we're talking about all these other things. Like it's changed even for us over 50 episodes from
Yep.
where we started. And I think you have to be okay with that, but you also have to start knowing that it's probably not going to look the exact same way. And,
Oh God,
you
I
know,
mean, come on. Think about Free Trail. We started with an app with
yep.
a different brand, a different name. And I mean, we're a completely different product, different brand, different company
Yeah.
than where we started.
Yeah.
But it all started from like that original insight of like, hey, let's start a podcast, you know? And now here we are. That's yeah, great point. Great
Okay,
point, Aaron.
we got to go back to the first part of this question because I think it's really important. How do you define success in your life or for the business you're building? I'll let you choose. You pick one.
I don't have a good answer for this because I genuinely I've been doing a lot of therapy recently, Aaron, and I'm very self-critical person, and I have a very hard time acknowledging our successes that we've had, and therefore I have a hard time really defining what success in the future would look like. Right now, as somebody who is in therapy working on himself, it would say a success to me would be continuing to be able to feed my family, be a present husband and dad, and not sacrifice my physical and mental health on work. Like if I were able to have a successful business without sacrificing in the way that I have in the last few years, that would be success to me.
That's a good one. I think success for me equals knowing what to do. I think that in a way, everything feels like success right now. Like, yeah, if you put out a video, people will watch it. If you put out a podcast, people will listen. And I don't necessarily know what the most successful thing is. I feel like I'm testing and learning so much. And for me, success would be knowing like if I do this thing, it's going to work and I can build on top of that even more by doing even more of it. And right now, it's like, well, where should I put my energy? There's six different things that are requiring my attention, and I'm not really sure which one is the one I'm supposed to do. They all seem to be working. And at some point, like that's not going to be sustainable. And so, success business wise would be absolutely that. I think success in life is, man, I just feel like being content with like where you're at, like feeling like it's all okay and that you have enough to, you're not striving for anything outside of your reach. Like I wake up right now and I'm really happy that I get to talk to one of my best friends every day on the internet, and I get to ride my bike, and I get to do stuff that I really want to do. And yeah, there's stressors here and there, but ultimately the things that I get to do are the things that I want to do. I'm not required to like I don't know. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time. And so in my real life, I'm really currently feeling very successful because I don't feel like I'm wasting my time with anything when it comes to work stuff, when it comes to family stuff. Like everything feels valuable. And I feel like if I could feel that way in business, I would be just over the moon because I think my problem is I don't know what's valuable when it comes to business. I just keep pushing on every thing that I can push on to try to work out where the value is, where
Yep.
everywhere else in my life, I know it's like valuable to spend time with my kids and with my wife and to go traveling with my oldest son. And, I don't know. That's all I can really say.
You know what that is, Aaron? Radical acceptance. Is being
There's,
okay with the unknown and just trusting that life is good, life is okay. You're heading in the right direction. I mean, that's the thing that I think a lot of us who are building the plane as you drive it off the cliff, so to speak, that's the hardest part is like
yeah,
just finding peace and fighting gravity sometimes. So good lesson.
yeah. Okay. Here's the next one. It's from Ryan Toomer. He says, all right, let's get hypothetical. You two just received an angel investment of $50 million to start a new brand in the outdoor space. Based on your learnings and insight in the first 50 episode, what's the play? Apparel, print, retail, travel, events, tech. Where do you place your bet? And what are a few key principles to found on and set yourself up for sustainable gains? Ryan Toomer, that's a
Big
heater.
one.
Yeah.
Love that abrupt transition from our touchy feely radical acceptance to galaxy brain time. Someone airdrops millions of dollars on your face. What do you do with it? You go first,
All
Aaron.
right, Ryan Toomer, if you have $50 million, I'm just gonna I'll put my Venmo in the show notes. Just go ahead and set it my way. And no, I look, I think one thing that's really interesting in general is people right now are really craving this ability to be connected and in person. And I think that some level of in person event is what needs to happen more in this world. And I think you could build a million different things in a million different directions on that. But as long as the core principle is that, I think it's interesting. If I'm really selfish about it, I would love for there to be a second nature job fair where we can have a big week of bringing in people to speak on stage, but then also there's this huge thing where everybody could come in and, present themselves for jobs and we could do something really cool. I feel like that crossover would be really cool for us to create content for the pod, for us to put together people who are in the industry or want to be in the industry, and the downstream effect of being at that inflection point for both brands and people working in the industry would pay off big time for a long time. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should be thinking bigger in terms of like, oh, what's a big tech idea or what's a big retail idea? But I just think there is something really meaningful in bringing people together. And I think what's important and what, especially with all the AI stuff that's coming for us and whatever, the thing that's going to last is going to be meaning. And if we can curate something that's meaningful and impactful to people's lives and their careers and the industry that we care most about, and do it in a way that helps the industry grow and, progress forward in every possible way, whether it's the product itself or the marketing or anything else, that would be really cool.
I think the Second Nature job fair should be a smaller feature of our bigger conference business.
Mm.
Like one afternoon is maybe the job fair day. And then we have a bunch of panel discussions, breakout sessions, keynote speakers, Second Nature Con.
I'm
That's going
in,
to
dude.
happen sometime soon. Actually, I got to tell you about something. Our buddy Doug Emsley, Second Nature listener, and my partner on TrailCon, is an OG legend of the events business, and we've already been kicking around some ideas. So, Aaron, I'll talk to you about that.
I got $50 million to spend, so let's party.
Thanks to Ryan Toomer. No, I do love that idea, and I think there is opportunity there. Okay, so I have a couple ideas written down here. Number one, I don't need to rehash the whole thing, but I think this Patreon for athletes idea is interesting. Like, I think there's something there, and I haven't fully figured out what the business model would look like, but the macro trend of institutions to individuals, betting on that in the sports space. And another idea could be starting an agency or something that helped prominent athletes create products that they could sell to their audience,
Hmm.
like nutrition brands or apparel or footwear, or I don't know, probably the less complicated to manufacture things, or even just like merch. Um, I think there's something there. That macro trend of institutions to individuals. I just think these challenger brands are only going to become bigger challengers. In other words, there's going to be many more smaller brands and businesses out there, and they're going to take market share from the large incumbents. And that's going to happen in every sport for the next 15, 20 years. So making some kind of bet there with $50 million would be interesting. And of course, Aaron, I want to start the Rafa of trail running, the Tracksmith of trail running, the apparel brand for trail runners that so signifies that you are enmeshed in our wonderful community and culture, that you're proud to rock a logo that signifies that. That's been something that's my ultimate project that I've yet to make any progress on. So
What do we do for second nature? Do we need to have like some workwear, like what you wear to the office to signal that you listen to the business to business podcast of the outdoor industry? What does
I
that
mean,
look like?
Patagonia vests is what that looks like, I think.
It's
Or no, that's like Silicon Valley
got to be
VCs.
a hoodie of some sort, maybe. I don't know.
Totally.
No, I mean, it's a really interesting question. And I think in the Slack, even we talked about like, what would it look like to have a fund? And then what would you do with it? And maybe that's sort of where this question is kind of inspired by as well. Like, where would you back people up? I think it's also really interesting. And we've talked about this a little bit, but what would an agency look like that creates content? Like basically adopt an athlete and then create the flywheel around them through content. Then you could connect your merch idea to that. And I think the Drive to Survive thing worked well on a big scale across an entire sport. But if you could deliver that across 6 athletes in 6 different sports in a really high level production way, what would that do? There was that thing that we referenced a few episodes back about the fame gap and how like women athletes can just like boost a sport into the stratosphere by being like crazy famous and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put that back in the Slack channel. But what if you pick out 6 and then you created this like giant flywheel of content and everything else around them? That could be really interesting too.
Yeah.
You got to
All
have real
right.
fun with 50 million. Okay.
Nice little galaxy brain there session.
All right. Always room for a galaxy brain on the pod.
Yeah.
Number 7. We're making good progress through here. I have a question from, please, I'm so sorry if I say this wrong, Mark Jantosic. I think I got it right.
Yeah.
What are y'all listening to on your rides and runs? What's in your head when you're doing your run?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. This won't surprise people, but because I've referenced these things in our show a few times. Invest Like the Best is a fantastic podcast. It's hosted by Patrick O'Shaughnessy, who to me is the best podcast host, the best question asker in the entire podcast game. Pat McAfee, I think, is a singular talent when it comes to sports broadcasting, and his show, which he does 3 hours every single day, his output is just staggering. Plus, he's on College Game Day. I'm completely burnt out all the time. I don't know how he does it, but he is the best single best talent, I think, at just being a sports broadcasting personality. And then I mentioned it at the top of the show, but Tetragrammaton, Rick Rubin's podcast is my favorite podcast at the moment. He is so good at briefly stating a question and then totally stepping out of the way. And he always like starts with very fundamental, simple things. He's not afraid to ask like what would be quote unquote dumb questions. And so because his guests are so varied, like you never feel like you're behind when you jump into one of the conversations. You never feel like, oh, like this is too much of an effort to learn anything about this subject matter. And you can usually pick up a really unique insight from each of his guests. And I would say the thing that I've taken most away from him is the ecosystem around the audio product itself. So the way that he does the social media around it, his website is absolutely beautiful. Even the ads within the shows are like pieces of art.
Yeah.
And so I love Rick Rubin. I love Rick Rubin. Everybody should listen to his show and buy his book and just take that artist mindset to every single detail of it. Like not just the conversation itself, but the ecosystem around it, the social media, even the ads are like beautiful and perfect and things that you want to listen to. So Tetragrammaton I listen to a lot.
He's very calm.
Yeah.
That is definitely on one of my, that's in heavy rotation. I would say one of my guilty pleasures for podcasts is My First Million. I love those guys. I think they're hilarious.
Yeah.
And I really like just the way that they approach everything. You'll probably, anybody who hasn't heard them, you'll definitely catch some similarities between, I think, what we do here and what they do there. They're a bit wider out. They're not outdoor by any means, but they talk a lot about like business ideas and stuff like that. So I take a lot of inspiration from those guys. I also take a lot of inspiration from Colin and Samir. So these guys, they're two friends who basically do sort of a B2B podcast about the creator economy. And they interview, Mr. Beast and whoever else, but they also provide a lot of actionable advice for creators. And so that kind of balance between the two is really interesting and sort of a little bit of, what I think we offer up to people as well. So I think those two podcasts are sort of inspiring to me of, directions we may end up ourselves and how they kind of, approach everything like that. So much of my stuff is like based in creator land and trying to become better at
Yeah.
creating content and understanding the right way to do it. There's Creator Science, there's the Nathan Barry Show, previously called Billion Dollar Creator. There's a handful of ones out there like that. And then every now and then, just guilty pleasure, I'd say How I Built This ends up in there too. So
Guilty pleasure. Come on. That is like an classic. I've used it on BPC like a billion times.
okay.
I was going to say, I am not really a listener or follower of Colin and Samir, but I subscribe to their show. I almost never listen to it. They
Mhm.
published an episode on Monday with Peter Attia about creator burnout.
Yeah.
And I was on a little, personal vacation trying to unplug. And it was the perfect thing for me to listen to. And it was Peter Attia who recommended Stillness is the Key. And
There you
so I
go.
went back to my Airbnb, ordered it, and it arrived yesterday. So as soon as I finish my self-help book, Radical Acceptance, I'll be digging into that.
Nice. So
So
good.
thank
So
you, Colin and Samir.
yeah, that's a great one. And honestly, when people ask me what I think second nature could be, I take a lot of inspiration from them because not only are they providing actionable information and interviewing the top people in their space, they actually host a lot of events too, a lot of B2B style events in the creator space. And I think that could be something really interesting for us to explore as, hosting different conversations, not just at TrailCon or at the Second Nature Job Fair, but elsewhere. I think that might be really interesting at some point. So anyway.
One thing I was just thinking about too, I can't remember where I saw this, but it was recently someone said people come to a podcast for the guests and stay for the hosts. And I would say for my contributions here, Invest Like the Best, like a lot of that shit is esoteric, like deep private equity finance stuff that I know nothing about. But the host, I think, is so good at what he does. I like listening to the show. Same with Pat McAfee. Like, okay, he'll have Aaron Rodgers and Bill Belichick and these people who like only come on his platform. So it's great to hear from them. But also, the host is just so good. Same with Rick Rubin. Most of his guests, I have no idea who they are, what they've done. But because I love Rick, it's really good. So that's something for us to aspire to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. We have Matthias Eichler. He says, you both have a lot of irons in the fire and are talking often about adding more. Guilty. Hypothetically, if you could only wear one of these hats for the rest of your career, which project would you choose and why?
You go first.
I guess this is maybe obvious, but I would definitely pick second nature. I
Hell yeah.
honestly, like, I've learned the most from the most amount of people. This opened me up well beyond the cycling industry to be here, and I absolutely love just everything that I get to learn. It's not just about the audience picking up information. I'm picking up a ton of stuff too, and I feel like being a podcast, you have this flexibility to bring on whoever you want to talk to, and having that opportunity for, like, unlimited learning indefinitely feels like the best possible place. I could ride my bike anytime I want, but this is a place where I can do different things and learn from people outside of my own circle. And I find that really interesting and enjoyable. And obviously you and I get to hang out on a regular basis. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well,
If you don't say second nature, we're not friends.
no, no. Well, the way that I thought about this when you sent me the questions was like specific individual tasks,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because as I said earlier in our conversation, I definitely am a shiny object syndrome person, and I always add things to my plate even when there's absolutely no room. And I'm actively right now thinking about ways that I can remove things and find efficiency so that I can focus on the things I love most. So I went just like a little bit more generic and just like, I love podcasting. I've always loved audio. And if there's one thing that I could do for the rest of my life and make money off of it, it would be recording podcasts, because I just love it. You know, ever since I was a kid, like I used to wake up to sports talk radio with an OG alarm clock back in the day, like for my whole life. And it was preordained, so to speak, that I was going to be doing it myself eventually. And it was you, Aaron. We've covered this many times, but it was you who finally made me do it. And I love that it's my job. I'm great. I should be more grateful that it's my job. And maybe going one level deeper. I also, one thing that it's helped me with is like I have no fear of public speaking at all anymore. Like I have no problem being on stage in front of hundreds of people and like leading a show. And I think that is something that I was only able to cultivate based on practice, right? Just doing things over and over. And I think in general, moderating discussions with multiple guests has become a really fun piece of my job that I really, really enjoy doing with live audience, multiple guests, and trying to like be the person who weaves everything together, gets everybody involved, makes sure that each person has an impact on the conversation. It's not an easy thing to do, but when you do it well, it's incredibly satisfying for somebody in my occupation. So, podcasting, number one, and the ability to just like be on stage and lead discussions as a moderator, I find incredibly fulfilling. And yeah, grateful that I'm able to do it. And if I had to only do one thing, it would be that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a question from Matt Sharkey. Sharkey actually sent us what do we have here? 8 questions total, which they're all really good. The one I chose out of the 8 was, from your youngest age, what's the first brand you remember having an affinity for, and how do you feel about that brand now? You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. The first brand that I can remember having a feeling about is Vans. And a big part of that was when I was younger, I was super into punk rock and actually was on the Vans Warp Tour for 2 years doing bike demos. So I get to travel around for 2 summers back to back, going to a punk rock show every single night. We got to hang out on stage and see basically every punk band that I could possibly ever want to see, I think. Yeah. And so being able to not only be a fan of the brand, but then experience it firsthand in the way that I did was actually pretty insane, because I was on the tour when I was, gosh, 20 and 21. So it wasn't long after I discovered the brand in the first place. And so being a young punk rocker and being in kind of the mountain bike BMX space where Vans was like revered, then being on the tour was like a crazy rise.
Yeah.
What do I think about them now? I'm not really sure. I haven't actually been following along. What I can recall is some of the Southern California stuff that they did around some of the US Open events and stuff like that. I think it's hard to kind of stay on the same path, the idea of what got you here won't get you there. I think Vance probably had to find a way to expand out. And there have been some, expansions and contractions over the years. I think that my nostalgia for the brand, I hope that they, continue to feed the core, because I think there's value in that. And that's what got them here. And I feel like somebody was telling me a story of when their new CEO came in, he made the entire company scroll through the website, and they didn't even get to a picture of somebody skateboarding until like 5 or 6 clicks deep, and was like,
Wow.
guys, what are we doing here? And so I'm not following Vans that closely right now, but I aspire to follow them again.
Wow, what a great answer. So you haven't followed at all what's happening with Vans recently.
Mm-mm.
Oh shit. It's a great story. Maybe we should break it down in a future episode
Let's
because
do
that
it.
is an iconic action sports brand, something that whose products I have owned about 1 billion pairs of those slip-ons. And yeah, obviously an iconic piece of skateboarding culture, Vans, and they have been through the ringer recently, but it seems like they're on the turnaround path under the leadership of Bracken Darrell, the new CEO of VF. And ironically, I chose a VF brand also, that being the North Face. So again, the question is, what was it, a brand that you resonated with early in your life, and what do you think about them now?
Yep.
So, I mean, I even have photo albums of me rocking various TNF Gore-Tex jackets because I was a hardcore skier for a lot of my life and fancied myself an outdoor person, even if I was focused mostly on team sports as a kid. And the North Face, of course, nothing more iconic than that in the outdoor industry. And I had the honor and pleasure to be a North Face athlete for, I think it was like 7 or 8 years that I was on the team. And outside of Red Bull, it's probably the best brand that you can be an athlete for, just in terms of how central athletes are to their marketing initiatives and to their product development. Athlete tested, expedition proven is the tagline. It very much felt that way. I left a couple of years ago on good terms, and appreciated my time there to pursue my this opportunity I've been working on with Speedland for a while, which was sort of feeling of graduation to a new type of athlete brand partnership with them, and that's been a really fun learning experience. But looking back on my North Face days, yeah, a lot of fond memories there, and still follow the brand closely, still admire a lot of the athletes, still know a lot of the people that work there. So nothing but positive feelings towards them. And yeah, I've had a multi-decade relationship with the brand in a lot of different ways, I guess. So,
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. All right. I'm going to bring us home. Number 10. Here we go. When are we going to hear more about that mystery new brand / product that you've all teased from our buddy Ian Gates, who actually is our trademark IP lawyer, who would tell us not to talk about that? But
Fancy you should ask, Ian Gates.
what can we say? What can we say? What will Ian allow us to say?
He gave us direction on that. We had a meeting with Ian today on Zoom about this. Maybe we should be cognizant of the fact there's probably a lot of people who've joined the Second Nature listenership since the last time we teased this, because it was really
Yes.
like the first couple episodes that we mentioned it and never since then. But Aaron and I have been working on an idea for our own consumer product for a long time. Like everything else when it comes to business, it takes way longer than you expect and will likely be a lot more expensive than we expect, but we're making progress on it. And yeah, we think it's a great concept, a great brand, and a unique novel opportunity in a sector that at least one of us knows incredibly well, and that we are the team that might be able to create something interesting. And one of the whole ideas of Second Nature was to document that process. We haven't been able to document it very much, but maybe in about a month or so, according to Ian, we might be a little bit more free to talk about it more. Comments, Aaron? What did I miss?
That was wow. You did a great job just like cutting around the real. Yeah, that was amazing. I think you're right. I think that was as much as we could really say. And I think you're the important thing is that second nature for us is like, how do we bring value? How do we share as much as we possibly can with the industry and help people learn and help people grow? But also selfishly, can we bring people on that can help educate us on the direction that we're trying to go? And that will become a lot more apparent in the next couple months. And I think it'll be kind of an interesting series or something that you can kind of follow along with. As soon as we can talk about it, we're probably not going to shut up about it. But I think it's going to be really exciting. And it is so different than, a lot of the stuff that we do talk about, but it is rooted in the outdoors. And it is something that's really excited. And the handful of people we have shared a little bit more information with have been extremely excited. And I think it's going to be a true test for both of us because we've both built businesses around content specifically in the outdoor industry. And now to have product that's not just t-shirts or beanies or whatever, it's going to be a true test of a lot of our skills, and it's going to be a great opportunity for us to learn a lot of new skills and pass that on to the wider group. And I'm hoping that we can also engage a lot of people in the second nature community to be a part of this journey, you know?
Anyway, good question from Ian Gates, our
Yeah.
IP attorney, who's also active in the Slack channel, who has helped both Aaron and I with Free Trail and Super Rider, respectively. So, to our listeners, if you're working on your own product or project or business of any kind, give a shout to Ian Gates in Slack. He can help you protect your IP or at least give you some advice as to how you might go about doing so. And he's helping us with both trademark and patent stuff right now. So shout out to Ian. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, more to come. We promise it's coming. Ian said give him like 4 weeks, I think. So as soon as Ian gives us the thumbs up, it's on.
I'm excited to reveal this publicly because literally every single person I've told about this has been like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And it's been like 5 years since I've been talking about it. So.
It's going to be nice to just have it out into the open. I think people are going to be pretty fired up.
Galaxy Brain in Practice. So
Yes.
maybe that'll be the title of our series, Galaxy Brain in Practice.
Yeah, here we go.
As we build in public, quote unquote. Lucy, what a great AMA, buddy. We just blasted through 10 questions. Thanks everybody for their submissions. There's a lot of good ones that we didn't get to also. So maybe we'll catalog some of these for future AMA for episode 100. We got to do this every 50 maybe.
Yeah, I'm down for that. I might go into the Slack and just try to answer the ones that we didn't get around to, just so that, but I'm so thankful of everybody that threw in questions for this. And again, like everybody that's in the Slack channel, thank you for being there. It's just incredible to see you all in there, interacting. And I've heard so many stories of people just connecting directly. Normal, the brand we interviewed a couple podcasts back, they just posted a job in the jobs channel of this Slack, like just out of the blue. So if you need a job in the outdoor industry, you might want to join the Slack too. But anyway.
Yeah. So good. So yeah, as Lucy said, go join the Slack. There's, a fraction of the audience actually is in there. So, and I've been shocked at just how valuable it's been for me personally. And I hope that is felt through the rest of the Second Naturalists. Subscribe to the newsletter, secondnature.media. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Fair and Lucy, I'm Debo. 50 episodes. Peace out.